I said at the start of the show that we had an interview, a statement put out by Attorney General Barr, and I'm talking about the whole election fraud thing, censoring witnesses, abetting election fraud in 2020. I want to start with what Attorney General Barr said today. Barr was reported in the Charlotte Observer to have said that the Justice Department has not uncovered evidence of widespread voter fraud that would change the outcome of the 2020 election. His comments were made despite what Trump has been saying. This was an interview with the Associated Press. Barr said U.S. attorneys and FBI agents have been working to follow up specific complaints and information they've received, but they've uncovered no evidence that would change the outcome of the election. So that's what we're going to talk about, is what in the world is happening in this country in these 2020 elections and where we are today, where we sit today on December 1st. Number one, we could spend the rest of the show running through all of the testimony given by various experts in the state legislatures around in the remaining states where the issue is in play. Yesterday, we played a great segment, a great little clip by a gentleman who was testifying in the Pennsylvania legislature. As we were doing the show yesterday, he was testifying in the Arizona legislature. That same gentleman, same issues. And then today there's a hearing in the Michigan legislature. We have in front of us, for people paying attention, this is not your usual run-of-the-mill, I think a few dead people voted this time, which seems to happen almost every time. What we are talking about was been uncovered and revealed by the evidence you saw on this show that Russ Ramsland has uncovered, that has been provided to Sidney Powell, that is the basis of much of her litigation, relates not just to the Dominion voting systems machines, which it does relate to those machines, but it relates to all of the electronic voting machines in this country and the Smartmatic software. And the software, as you heard, that I believe we played that portion yesterday, the witness pointing out that all these electronic voting machine companies, they're interrelated, they sell each other pieces of equipment, they sell each other software, they license software. It's all, as they say, has a common ancestry. We're talking about the potential capacity in America to completely steal an election through the manipulation of electronic voting tabulation software, and that we have not just the experimental, could this possibly be done, but the actual proof having been laid out before on this show with Russ Ramsland, the ASOG, Allied Security Operations Group, that he's been testifying in places around the country. People from his organization have been testifying around this country. We have, just the sheer, lack of possible coincidence. I'll just tell you that the number of things to run through that tell you that there was massive election fraud in this election cycle. We have affidavit after affidavit, people talking about people running the same ballots through the machines over and over, counting the same ballots over and over, so that, what should count for a stack of 25 ballots becomes a stack of whatever, running through 10 times is 250 ballots. We have that kind of testimony. We have the shutting down at almost the same time in all of these most important swing states of the counting in the evening of the election, November 3rd, where the election is clearly trending toward Trump is going to win, and all of a sudden, things are shut down, massive numbers of alleged mail-in ballots arrive, and lo and behold, they are extraordinarily, they're overwhelmingly votes for Biden, so that everything looked like it was on track for Trump. All of a sudden, what do you know? Biden won after all, state after state. We have that kind of fraud. We have the kind of fraud where people have been testifying that the way the votes are being tallied, they are being added in, alleged to have been counted at a rate faster than any machine can count. No machine could count that number of ballots. They just got plopped in the total. There's a specific point, a great point being made by Senator Rand Paul, and he's talking about 4 data dumps. Rand Paul, Republican, he's actually kind of a libertarian, but Republican from Kentucky, 4 data dumps in the witching hour after the election gave Biden the victory. He, on Sunday afternoon, shared this analysis of the 2020 election results in the key swing states of Georgia, and he says, and especially statistical anomalies in 4 particularly suspicious data dumps in the key swing states of Georgia, Michigan, and Wisconsin, basically making the point Trump's margin of defeat in 4 states occurred in 4 data dumps in a small period of time. Lo and behold, middle of the night, so November 3rd or it's early morning, November 4th, and lo and behold, who knew, between 1:34 a.m. and 6:31 a.m., you had 4 different states data dumps that all of a sudden turned those elections from clearly Trump on track to win to, oh, who knew, Biden won. And this is Rand Paul running through an anonymous report. Claims have investigated 8,954 updates to the vote totals in all 50 states, and all 4 of the updates profoundly anomalous. They deviate from a pattern otherwise found in the vast majority. I mean, he's running through a detailed analysis, making the point that in this entire beautiful country of 50 states and everybody voting, you had in the very important swing states where everyone understands the decision comes down to, Georgia, Michigan, and Wisconsin, those states, you had the data, you had these late night dumps of votes that were overwhelmingly for Biden, and that just, they don't hold up to scrutiny, they don't hold up to reason. So this is what the report you're getting out of him. And actually, he gives more detail. You can go to our website and read this, americacanwetalk.org. On the homepage, under shows, drop down list of links. The article to which I'm referring is entitled 4 Data Dumps in the Witching Hour after the election gave Biden the victory. Rand Paul has questions. So he's saying, wow, isn't that magical and amazing that all these last minute votes showed up after these states had to shut down their counting, and when they were counting, clearly Trump was on the way to victory, and these magically show up. Other new pieces of litigation. I'm going to get back to Barr in a moment, but other pieces of litigation. A new lawsuit by the Trump team is claiming Wisconsin. They counted 221,000 illegal votes just in Wisconsin. Lawsuit by the Trump team that they counted 221,000 illegal votes. You have, there was another one I wanted to read to you that was just these staggering numbers. And I'm going to get around to responding to what Barr said today. Is deeply, deeply, deeply disappointing. But you had in Arizona all sorts of testimony. Okay, this is what I wanted to get to. Michigan, in the state of Michigan, illegally counted or ignored 500,000 ballots. This is a lawsuit by the Amistad Project. Amistad Project in Michigan, new lawsuit alleging Michigan counted or ignored 500,000 ballots, more than the margin of victory. So what I want to get at is this. You have Sidney Powell filing her lawsuits and pursuing her lawsuits that relate to electronic manipulation of the voter tabulation software. So you have Sidney Powell pursuing that. You have the Amistad Project filing lawsuits. You have thousands of Americans writing affidavits telling what I saw. You have witnesses willing to come forward and tell in open testimony, here's what I saw. I saw this cheating. You have statistical anomalies, which translates into really just proof of fraud, examples of fraud, times when all of a sudden a massive number of new votes comes in, of new ballots come in, and they're almost all for Biden, inconsistent with any other pattern being shown in that same state prior to these magical ballots appearing. People, the American people, at this point, what is happening, besides Trump's lawyers, who are pursuing various claims, what you have is the American people, the grassroots, the American people rising up to challenge obvious election fraud. You have groups like ASOG here in Dallas, Russ Ramson's group. You have them going around the country providing testimony, providing experts who can lay out and tell you. You have the affidavit by a guy who is in Venezuela at the table with the Smartmatic voting system people as they sat there and promised Hugo Chavez that there was absolutely no way he would lose or that Maduro would lose because this machine, this Smartmatic machine, was going to make sure they could guarantee him that Maduro would win. This is a Smartmatic election they're not election machines, but the software, Smartmatic software, promising this. And you have someone living in America willing to write an affidavit saying, I was sitting there, I heard them say it. This is exactly what it is. You have overwhelming evidence that the Dominion voting system machines are vulnerable, can be easily hacked. You had this testimony yesterday that I played in the show. The one gentleman who was, I think, from ASOG, who was testifying in Pennsylvania, he also had an affidavit. He had a direct conversation with a person who was whose uncle in Cuba was familiar with the whole situation in Venezuela, and said, "Oh yeah, they were saying, they promised Chavez, don't worry, Maduro's going to get this. Don't worry, Maduro's going to win because we've said it for you." We had the story yesterday of Eric Coomer, Dr. Eric Coomer, who was the top security guy for Dominion voting system, who said on a Zoom call, when someone said, "But what if Trump wins?" He said, "Don't worry, I fixed that. There's no effing way Trump will win. I have taken care of that." You have all this evidence being reported in the key legislatures in this country by citizen advocate. Sidney Powell is just a plain, straightforward citizen advocate. She happens to be one of the brightest lawyers in the country and most well-recognized, well-respected. She's out there putting her reputation on the line to say, because she's seen the detailed evidence that ASOG has. So you have grassroots people, grassroots organizations, you have grassroots individuals, you have Sidney Powell, you have American citizens rising up and saying to these legislatures, don't certify this election. There was fraud. We can show it. We can prove it. We have affidavits. And where are the leaders, beside President Trump? Where are the leaders on the Republican side? I could name on one hand all the Republicans I can think of who've been in any way helpful to President Trump as he attempts to fight this massive election fraud. On one hand, I'm obviously Congressman Gohmert. He's been on the show recently and many times. Congressman Louis Gohmert speaking right up, well aware of what's happening. I think Matt Gaetz has been a little bit helpful. Jeff Jordan a little bit. I mean, really, it's a small handful of Republicans willing to speak up. And you have stone cold, submitting, surrendering silence from the vast majority of Republicans in Washington. On top of that, you have Governor Ducey in Arizona. After hearing all of the testimony I was just describing to you, after hearing that was testimony yesterday, oh, by the way, during that testimony yesterday, one of the people testifying is a mathematician, some guy who's basically laying out the case that it is impossible for these numbers. He's a digital forensic, math guy who's laying out for the legislature saying, these are impossible. These couldn't have happened. Try to get his name, but this mathematician, a mathematician who testified in front of the Arizona legislature. His name is Bobby Pitton. He writes on social media and Parler, and he essentially was testifying that the allegations of voter fraud are very, very sound, very valid, and talks about the numbers. He said, I never would have certified the election results in Arizona based on the data I have seen. These results should never be certified. He's a mathematician and a digital forensic mathematician. And while he's testifying in Arizona yesterday, Twitter suspended his account. And as you were just hearing from Dr. Piper, as others would tell you, they just suspend your account. You don't know why. That you're just told for violating Twitter standards. And I can tell you from having tried to appeal on YouTube, there's no answer. Oh yeah, you can appeal right here. And then within a nanosecond, you get an auto reply, appeal denied, thank you very much. They're not listening. They're a part of the effort to shut this down. So you have Twitter playing along. You have the digital forensic guy shut down. You have all the examples we just gave you. And so what do you do when you are a legislator? What do you do when you're the one sitting there and you can hear all this evidence and you hear silence from the Republicans? So all you're hearing is the grassroots rising up, and you hear nothing from Republican leaders. like all of the Republican leaders, House and Senate, and the legislatures around this country, and you have the grassroots screaming from the rooftop saying, please look at the evidence, please examine this. What do? And then you have Attorney General Barr weigh in. And now I want to talk about Attorney General Barr for a moment. I still have two quick topics for today, but Attorney General Barr. I happen to know that ASOG, the group here in Dallas, Allied Security Operations Group, made extreme repeated efforts over the last 2 years, because what they uncovered about the ability to commit fraud in the voting systems, what they uncovered in Dallas in 2018, they tried to get that information in front of numerous elected officials with authority to investigate, one being the Department of Justice. I know ASOG tried to bring their evidence of election fraud, of the vulnerability of the voting machines, of Dominion, ES&S, all these voting machine companies, how they're easily hackable, votes can be changed, hardly any record available, hardly a trace left. They worked, and they are very connected people, and they could not get the Attorney General to sit down and listen. They could not get other officials to sit down and listen. They got we don't want to hear it, we're not really sure, no, we're not going to hear that. And so now we sit here on December 1st with the citizens screaming, experts testifying all over this country, explaining what's been happening, and then Attorney General Barr, who could have stayed silent, given that he's never seen this evidence, and he weighs in today to say, well, we've been looking into it, we don't really see anything, nothing that would change the outcome. Folks, if you listen to the show very often, I have been very grateful for many things that Attorney General Barr has said. Very grateful for many things he said we're going to investigate, we're going to get to the bottom of it, we're going to keep pursuing it. And I was very grateful he became Attorney General because Jeff Sessions really was not doing his job. But where we sit now, with the elections of 2020 on the line, with the reality that unless these states who are certifying uncertify, unless they listen to the grassroots, they listen to the testimony, they listen to the experts, they listen to the demonstrations, they listen to the people, unless they listen, they have, the temptation is to get it certified, get it done, get it beyond me, I don't really want to deal with this. And then they have Attorney General Barr weigh in. It makes it very easy for them to say, okay, you know what, I know these people are upset, but there are people upset every election cycle. There's always somebody crying fraud. We can't go down this path. We can't disrupt the elections. We can't do this. And so the temptation is to certify. The other pressure on people in Washington, the elected Republicans in Washington, is this. If the states certify this election, so the vote goes to the Electoral College, and the Electoral College on December 14th meets and has indeed 270 or more votes for Biden, then it's going to be much harder for the Supreme Court, even if they find massive evidence of fraud, very hard for the Supreme Court to overrule the Electoral College and put the decision in the Supreme Court's other choice if the Electoral College has said Biden won, and now the Supreme Court is looking at cases that to them reveal massive fraud in the system, and the Supreme Court wants to rule on them and choose the other avenue it has available to it. It is, under the Constitution, to put the decision over into Congress, to put the decision in the hands of the House and the Senate. And I think this is the reason all of the virtually all the elected Republicans in the House and Senate are silent. They don't want to be the ones to make this decision. They don't want to be the ones that people will claim that if the elected Republicans who have the majority vote in the House, because they have the 26 delegations, it's a delegation vote, so they can vote for the Republican candidate if it gets to the House. But if they do that, they are going to have the wrath of the left, the wrath of the Democrat media mob, the wrath of Antifa, the wrath of BLM, the wrath of the radical left in this country, blaming them for the election outcome if it goes to Congress. So to have the Electoral College solve this for them makes their life much easier. It makes it much easier for the Republicans in the House and Senate if the decision is never going to come to them because the Electoral College got to a majority vote. This, I think, is what is motivating those extremely timid Republicans in the House and Senate to not speak up in the face of obvious, overwhelming election fraud. If they speak up and they weigh in and they say, hey, you states, you can't be certifying this fraud, you've got to investigate, they run the risk that Electoral College doesn't pick a winner on December 14th. The decision ends up in the Supreme Court. The court sends it to Congress, and then the decision sits in their wimpy laps. And they don't want to do that. They don't want to be the ones to choose a president and incur the wrath of the radical, violent American left in this country. They'd rather have it solved by the state legislatures, even if it means confirming, certifying an election filled with fraud. That's, I think, is going on. I am beyond words disappointed in Attorney General Barr because I know his office didn't take the time to understand the evidence that does exist as to election fraud. And this, given what we're all watching in this country, the people paying attention in the legislatures around this country where testimony is occurring and this massive election fraud is being uncovered and hundreds of thousands of votes are flipped, hundreds of thousands being the subject of litigation saying these are illegal votes, they should never have been counted, the mail-in ballot scam the Democrats got away with, all of that should have given Attorney General Barr pause and caused him to say, you know what, I'm not getting into this right now. I'm just not going to do it. I'm going to let the investigation go. Especially, this is the same Attorney General who claimed he was looking into the Russia collusion hoax, that John Durham is going to get to the bottom of it and they're going to make sure and root out lawlessness, and nothing has happened. The election has come and gone. Durham is still allegedly looking into things, digging up things. Pretty soon we're going to have the answer. Well, pretty soon it's going to be January 20th of 2021. And if we have Biden as president, every bit of investigation Durham has done, every bit of evidence, every bit of the ability and right and what should happen, which is bringing charges to grand juries, getting indictments, and prosecuting the perpetrators of the Russia collusion hoax, all of it will be washed away. Barr has succeeded in not holding anyone accountable yet in the Russia collusion hoax. Not a single person held accountable for their conduct. What all of America knows happened, and now is throwing in jabs, essentially, at the Trump administration for challenging the outcome of this election in the face of the evidence of massive election fraud. A truly, a truly black mark against the name of Attorney General Barr in his conduct in these statements today. He's encouraging the legislatures to throw in the towel, to stop listening to the grassroots, to stop listening to the evidence, to stop listening to the experts. Just certify your state and move it along. He's giving them more ammo to do that. Truly disgraceful.